a reason you pick yourself up, start the day. Maybe it's sheer grit. Maybe it's your ethics.
And today is
Yes, Monday, June 15, 2020. I'm Ron Grant.
and I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes. Welcome everyone. Another beautiful day
Yes.
in the Virgin Islands. Today I don't know if you were able to go down in town and experience our new traffic road.
Yeah, it was quite an adventure, to be honest with you, but I think that once we get accustomed to it, to be honest with you, Kyla, I think we will see Road Town, the capital, transform, and I think that's what we're looking forward to.
Most definitely, Ron.
I want to begin this newscast. We're not going to get into our news right now, but this week is Men's Health Week, and I want to begin by appealing to my brothers and fathers particularly, as it is Father's Day week and weekend coming up. From the 15th to the 22nd, the Ministry of Health and Social Development, along with the Honorable Carvin Malone, will be embarking on a journey to men's health. Now, we caught up with the Honorable Minister of Health and Social Development, the Honorable Carvin Malone, earlier today, and he had a very, very special message for all men, particularly fathers, as we approach Men's Health Week. Take a
Well, I'd like to announce that June 15th starts the Men Health Week. June 15th through the 22nd will be celebrated, and this cannot be just a buzzword. Men have to begin to take their health more serious. In fact, this year it is centered around the COVID-19 because COVID-19 is real. It has been experienced throughout the world. It has affected populations throughout the world. It has affected businesses. And this is the time that we must look in terms of taking men's health serious because men are very vulnerable in this COVID-19 period. So we would like to center our attention to getting the best out of the new normal, the new regular, as we will call it. We want to address any underlying health conditions that would contribute to the COVID-19 virus. We want to understand that that social distancing is one of the best measures in fighting this virus. We want to understand and how to make workplaces safe. And we also want to increase our hygiene practices. We want to make sure that we wash our hands, we sanitize, we wipe surfaces, we do whatever is required in order to keep ourselves, our family, our community safe. So we would have a wider message that will be broadcast, but I would like to take this time to encourage men to take their health seriously. And why do we do this? We are aware that Sunday would be Father's Day, so I'd like to take this time to wish all men, all fathers, all father figures a happy Father's Day, and make sure that you demand the same respect that mothers got on Mother's Day. It is important. So happy Father's Day, and take your health serious.
Kyla, very encouraging words from the Honorable Minister of Health and Social Development, the Honorable Carvin Malone. For some reason, us men, we don't care for our health. Particularly, I shouldn't say don't care, but we don't take that time and effort to nurture our bodies. And this particular week, as it's being celebrated as Men's Health Week, we want to employ all men, particularly fathers, to, as we talk about non-communicable diseases, we want to make sure that they're healthy and they're efficient and they're ready to take care of their families.
As you said, and I'm glad that you admitted it.
Yeah. You don't like going to the doctor.
Yeah,
I just don't
like going
yeah.
to the doctor. But as Men's Health Week approach, really want to push and encourage our dads, fathers, all males in the community to really take care of your health because we definitely need you.
Indeed. Now, continuing on, beginning our newscast over the weekend, officers from the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, Her Majesty's Prison, and the BVI Fire and Rescue Services received awards for long-standing and service and good conduct, of course, at a private ceremony held by the Government House. His Excellency the Governor Augustus J.U. Jaspert explained at the ceremony that while the tradition is to, of course, hold a grand birthday celebration and parade in honor of Queen Elizabeth II, its official birthday this year event was significantly scaled back to allow for adequate social distancing in keeping with the COVID-19 best practices. Governor Augustus J.U. Jasper said, and I quote, "This is not a normal ceremony with the full parade and celebration that we would have all been accustomed to mark the official birthday of Her Majesty the Queen, but it gives me great pleasure that we have adopted that we can ensure that in a safe social distance way that we are still able to mark the birthday of our sovereign." The governor added by saying, and I quote, "Recognizing loyal service was an ideal way to observe the occasion. This is no more fitting way to mark the 94 years of a dedicated service to the public across the world than to recognize and award medals to those who have been dedicated and dedicated their lives to service as well." The ceremony was also attended by, of course, the Honorable Premier and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Andrew A. Foy, Minister of Natural Resources and Labor, the Honorable Vincent Wheatley, as well as Education Minister, the Honorable Dr. Natalia Wheatley, as well as Labor Minister Vincent Wheatley, and of course, Deputy Governor David Archer and others. Now, the full list can be viewed on our website of those who received honors, but they would split up in different categories from 18 years to 25 years to 30 years, and they spanned, of course, the police service, Her Majesty's Prison, and the fire and rescue, our good old neighbors across the street who continue to work hard in protecting us from fires. Kyla, despite being a different scene, I think it's not only a tradition, but it is a worthwhile tradition,
right,
where public servants in the Virgin Islands are being awarded for their hardworking service on the Queen's birthday. We congratulate all of them for their exemplary performance, and we continue to wish them the very best.
Most definitely, and I couldn't even say it better. As we move on now, Ron, in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, which have crippled economies around the world, the government of the Virgin Islands is moving to temporarily extend the territory's maximum layoff period from 3 months, that was first stated in the labor code, to 7+ months. This time frame being from March 14, 2020 to October 31st, 2020. Provisions to facilitate this extension was made in the Labor Code Amendment Act 2020, which was passed in the House last Thursday, June 12th. Let's hear what Honorable Vincent Wheatley, now being the minister responsible for labor, as he explained this specific amendment.
Mr. Speaker, the bill entitled Labor Code Amendment Act 2020 is before this Honorable House as it seeks to amend the Labor Code 2020, Section 107(2)(c) by inserting a new subsection, which will be known as Section 107(4), which provides for the extending of the period of 3 months for the payment of severance pay to employees who have been laid off due to the COVID-19 pandemic without a specific date of re-employment. The proposed extension will allow an employer to lay off an employee for a period beginning 14th March, which coincides with the cancellation of all cruise ships calls to the Virgin Islands and represents the first stage in the closure of our borders, and not to exceed 31st October 2020. Mr. Speaker, this is with the expectancy that if the employee is not reinstated, severance will be payable immediately on or after 31st October 2020.
Now we see the Honorable Wheatley in the House of Assembly basically laying out what this amendment means for employees and employers. Now, Honorable Wheatley additionally said that this amendment will alleviate the burden on employees to seek alternative employment and on businesses to identify the necessary funding for severance where applicable. The Minister for Labor reminded employers to be considerate to their employees by notifying them of any changes to their employment agreement and gaining their agreement to the changes prior to contacting the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. Before passing this amendment in the House, of course, Honorable Julian Fraser, opposition member and the representative for the 3rd Electoral District, he challenged that claim that the amendment was beneficial to both employers and employees. Hear what Honorable Julian Fraser had to say in regard to this new amendment to the Labor Code.
Is it benefiting the employer or the employee? Don't tell me it's benefiting both. It's a win-win. It can't be. if you are supposed to pay an individual severance after 3 months, and you're extending it to 6 months, Mr. Speaker, it has to be benefiting the employer. What is an individual going to do being unemployed for 6 months? He's going to find a job. He's going to look for a job. And if he finds a job on the 4th month, it means that he doesn't get severance pay, does it? You extended it to 6 months. If you go out and find a job within that period, you're on your own, aren't you? I laid you off for I got a grace period to lay you off for 6 months. If you go out and find a job within that period, you get severance still? Then what's the point in extending it? If that is clear, that within the period of layoff, within that 6-month period of layoff, you go and you find a job, you are still beholden to pay me my severance. Make that clear to the employees out there because they are concerned about that. They want to make sure that if they go out and find a job, they're going to get their severance pay.
Great point by Honorable Fraser there. Honorable Fraser, he urged Honorable Whitley to include a section in the amended legislation to actually protect the severance pay of employees who have sought temporary work during this temporary termination period. In response to Honorable Fraser's remark, Minister Whitley, he ensured that the issue of severance pay will be addressed in the committee stage of the proceedings. The committee stage is when the House privately convenes to carefully examine every clause and make any changes if necessary. As promised by Minister Whitley, the adjustments were made to make sure that employees' severance pay will be protected while securing any temporary employment.
Carla, this is of paramount importance when it comes to both employers and employees. Sometimes we tend to neglect either or. In situations, but we have to understand in these particular times, in such crisis times, these situations affect both persons, both employees and employers, and we don't at any one point in our Virgin Islands want to seem as though we're favoring one or the other, but at the end of the day it has to be the best practice for both, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
Most definitely. I think when the conversations just came about, people probably felt as though this was leaning more in the favor of the employer, but really great point by Honorable Fraser, and definitely something that needed to be stated in that legislation to make sure that severance pay, although because of course 7 months is a very long time for persons to go without any employment, so even if seeking temporary employment, persons are still entitled to that severance pay if they've worked for years at an foreign institution or establishment. Most definitely. So viewers, still ahead, BVI companies resolve poll sharing issues, and BVI activists organize a Black Lives Matter movement, and we also have a live interview with Dr. Michael Turnbull. You don't want to miss this. This is 284 News, and we'll be right back.
There's a reason you get up on a morning. A reason you pick yourself up, start the day. Maybe it's sheer grit. Maybe it's your ethics. Maybe it's because you know people like you are waiting for people just like you. We all have our reasons, and for Republic Bank, that reason is you. Every little thing, every big thing. It's all about making a difference in your life. Because after 182 years, if it's one thing we're sure about, is that the difference is you. We're here to help.
Republic Bank, we're the one for you.
Viewers, welcome back. You're watching 284 News. Very good news. The BVI Electricity Corporation and BVI Cable TV have reached an agreement on the sharing of the pole infrastructure to allow for both companies to serve the Virgin Islands community. Chairman of the BVI Electricity Corporation, Mrs. Rosemary Flax, stated, and I quote, "I am pleased that both organizations were able to find common ground in advancing the best interest of all stakeholders and investment in a manner that will add value to the economy of the Virgin Islands." Premier Foy held a meeting on October 7th, 2019, to listen to the concerns of the BVI Electricity and the BVI Cable TV regarding pole sharing. Chief Executive Officer of the Telecommunications Regulatory Commission, Mr. Guy Malone, was also present at the meeting. Both parties came to a final decision on June 4th, and BVI Cable TV will now be able to attach its infrastructure to poles owned by BVI Electricity Corporation. Now, the companies have been in an ongoing dispute since the BVI Electricity Corporation replaced the territory's poles post-hurricanes Irma and Maria. The parties could not reach an amicable agreement on several issues, including the replacement of poles, rental rates, safety protocols, and of course the best practice. Prior to the hurricanes of 2017, 55% of the pole infrastructure in the Virgin Islands belonged to the BVI Electricity Corporation. In addition to that, Flow owned 35% and BVI Cable TV 10%. We're happy to see that all parties have come to an agreement and we're being able to move forward.
Most definitely, Ron. Now, Ron, as we move on, now today, our viewers might have heard about it. A graphic illustration was actually released on a local news agency, a news site, and that ignited some rage here in the territory with all that is happening in the world as it pertains to the Black Lives Matter movement and the fight against racism. The illustration was posted illustrating a white male which resembles the governor of the territory kneeling on a commentator of a popular talk show here in the territory. The man is saying, "Honestly speaking, I can't breathe." This graphic replicates the scene of George Floyd's death, and we've all been speaking about this for the last few weeks. George Floyd was a black man that died in the United States in the custody of the police officers, as a police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes as he cried for help for his mom and also saying, "I can't breathe." So persons in the territory took to social forums to voice their disapproval with this illustration. Now, today we are joined by businessman, pastor, and clinical psychologist, Dr. Michael Turnbull. We do have Dr. Michael Turnbull here live in studio with us. How are you today, Dr. Turnbull?
Overall, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish I was here under different circumstances, but there comes a time where you have to leave from behind your desk and your place of comfort to speak on issues that affect people and human beings worldwide. And that's why I'm here, because as you referenced, Kyla, that image sparked something within me and others throughout this community that is unacceptable. For this local news agency, Virgin Islands News Online, to be publishing something like that is irresponsible. Now, people will say we can't allow people to have, deny people's freedom of speech. This is not an attack on freedom of speech. This is a call for social responsibility. And it's also a call for those that support and sponsor articles on this site to make a definitive decision, have some level of corporate responsibility to the citizens. As someone who died as a police officer, kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes and 45 seconds, literally crying out for his mother, stating, "I can't breathe." And to use that for political mileage or for clicks on your website in a time where the world is grappling with coronavirus, where all over the world, every continent, people of all races are coming for racial equality, this can't happen. And I spoke to your CEO before coming on, and I told him, I said, you have a responsibility 284 News and CCT to pull your ads from Virgin Islands News Online and other places that are supporting such media houses that don't have the fortitude or the social responsibility or the recognition or for the family to say that this is not acceptable.
Right.
What message are we sending to our children? What are we trying to promulgate? That we have the governor who's symbolizing this. We have Claude Skelton Klein who's symbolizing this. Regardless of political views, these are human beings that are touching on a topic that is so critical and essential that we cannot make light of that and use and run behind freedom of speech.
Right.
I'm not telling Vino to stop publishing whatever they choose to publish. I'm asking for the corporate citizens, for the CCTs, the NAGICO, the TAGs, the 284 Media, the CCT News. You guys need to change. BNF Medical Complex, all of you that choose to advertise and give, they will not make a change unless they feel it in their pockets. As a business person, that you know that it feels in your pockets. I'm not causing for the site to be closed down, but we have to start to hold people in our society accountable when their actions affect those around us.
Right.
And it creates an environment that is traumatic. Racism throughout the world is known as a significant traumatic effect.
Indeed.
And it affects you psychologically, emotionally, and mentally. And we can't allow it to go unhinged. So I'm calling for these corporate sponsors to hold these persons accountable. So because you're implicitly, by your silence, supporting such attitudes. And this is not an attack on this news site. However, you're behind the 8 ball right now, and there's something that needs to be done. I also reached out to the news media. I also reached out to their house and spoke to them directly at 8 a.m. this morning. And right now, as I just checked, that image is still there, where our governor currently is kneeling on the neck of a local person. Not only the contrast, but what it represents, that someone lost their lives for 8 minutes and 46 seconds crying out for help. We are not trying to act as if everything in the world is perfect, but we have a social, corporate, and regional responsibility to create an environment to make it better for our children. Black Lives Matter is not to say that other lives doesn't matter, but it's been known that black people have been disenfranchised throughout the diaspora for years. And for us as corporate citizens to support this news site in this manner is not acceptable. So I've called my friends, I've reached out because we need to make a shift. Every time that a shift comes, there needs to be some level of discomfort. And we need to hold people accountable. So again, this is not an attack on freedom of speech. Everyone has the right to say what they want. It doesn't mean I must support you, though.
Agreed. So just a question. From your point of view, what effect can such irresponsible journalism and this lack of social responsibility can have on our community?
Well, if you just think about it, the governor has children. Mr. Klein has children. If their children were to ever see this image and ask, why are you doing this? This is not right. And they have to have this conversation or teased or mocked. It takes away from the social fabric of humanity and making light for clicks. It's not propagated to start a conversation. It wasn't there to promote a higher social cause. It's clickbait. This is what you call ad selling. There's no social responsibility. So the effect when people make decisions lawlessly without ethical checking and out any censorship, it creates a society where people feel like they have a pass to do whatever they like. So the impact seems very small. It might seem like a strong response, but it has far-reaching impacts to all of us. So we need to be responsible and create the society that we want to live in. And this is not a society that I want my children living in, where people feel that they can promulgate hate, be irresponsible, and have lack of respect, and show no remorse, show no change in direction. Everyone makes mistakes. But by this time, 6 o'clock, there should have been some retraction, some acknowledgement for the insensitivity of what has happened, especially being alerted. So since they don't want to make a change, let's show our kids that the corporate responsibility, the men and the women in charge of these companies that are sponsoring, put them on notice, because this is not right. This is not right. And if you've seen anyone, myself included, who've been pulled over, racially profiled, stopped every time, that the scariest thing when you used to leave your house when I lived in DC was getting pulled over by the police. And to see someone promulgate that and not have the sensitivity, it brings up bad memories, even for me. I have frat brothers right now in the United States marching and sharing, and they are being beat up, tased, tear gassed, fighting for something. And right here locally, although we may not see it or feel it every day, that the effects, it affects us, because our children go to America to school. We have family and friends there. So we can't accept it here. Martin Luther King says a threat to justice anywhere it affects us all over. So injustice anywhere affects justice everywhere. So yes, it might not be in our front door right now, but we are descendants of slaves. We know what it is to fight for freedom, and we know how much we've worked to live with our brothers and sisters, and to loosely, unethically support this. That means that as a corporation, these corporations that are supporting these ads in this news site, you're saying to me that you're complicit with this kind of attitude unless we see something different. It's not a bullying. I just want to know, who is it that we're supporting? What is your moral compass? What are you choosing to do? Because this is not right.
Most definitely. So let's speak a little bit. You spoke about corporate responsibility and those businesses who are advertising with this agency at this time, really digging down. But since we don't have any legislation, I'm sure much persons have reached out to the agency, speaking to the insensitivity of the issue. But what can persons do? Businesses, what can they do? Let's reiterate that a little bit.
Well, what businesses can do, don't send a notice, cancel your contract, and says you have 2 days, 24 hours to send a retraction, or you lose my business. Because that site, any site, media, this news station, exists to sell ads. Okay, it's a business. Yes, you have some social responsibility, but it's a business. Send them a strong note. Also, post on your site, on your social media page, that you do not support actions that promulgate hate and violence. And that's what this does, because it unfairly uses someone who lost their life for 8 minutes and 45 seconds of police brutality for clickbait. That is not responsible. Are you telling me that CCT, that you support this, that BNF, you support this, that TAG, you support this, that the Tortola Pier Park, you support this? The government of the Virgin Islands that has so much ads on, you're telling me that you support this kind of behavior? We must do different and hold them accountable.
Most definitely.
Call them the same way you send them the check, send them an email, send them a letter, call them and says, we don't want to be associated with this. Give them an opportunity to retract. If they choose not to retract, pull your funding. That will get their attention.
Most definitely. Before we leave, you spoke a little bit about the fact that this isn't knocking on our front door, thankfully, here in the BVI. But let's speak a little bit about being responsible allies and why is it important for us to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the United States and the entire Black Lives Matter movement? Well,
I mean, the movement, see, the thing is about Black Lives Matter, it's not a disenfranchisement of any other racial class. It's been known and documented that Africans in the diaspora have been disproportionately affected by racism and segregation and other laws. And what we are trying to do is, I don't want a better seat at the table, I just want an equal seat at the table. Right. And that's what we're trying to do, give an equal seat at the table. Now, regardless of your race, class, or creed, we want to create children environments where people understand, yes, our racial skin color may be different, but we're all equal. Indeed. We're human beings, and we deserve to be treated with ethics, respect, and human dignity. And any threat to that, whether it happens in Virgin Gorda, Just Van Dyke, Washington, D.C., or Minneapolis, is a threat to us, because we don't promote that in our households. Those are not the values that we support. And that's why we're asking. Let's just hold people accountable. You can say whatever you want. That doesn't mean I must agree.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Turnbull. Before you leave, is there anything else you would like to say?
I just want to say, you know, like, I don't speak often, but this, with so much things that are happening in my line of work as a psychologist, I see how trauma, hate, and hurt affects people. I'm not calling on you to fail any business. I'm calling on you to hold them accountable. Our kids are watching us, and they're going to ask us, what did you do when this came out? You want to be able to look them squarely in the eye and say, listen, I did the best I could. I spoke up. I may have lost some friends. But sometimes in a fight for justice, you might lose something. But you don't gain the world and lose your soul. We're fighting for the soul of humanity, that everyone should be treated equally. And let's come together.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Dr. Turnbull, for coming and speaking on this issue and just speaking to the entire BVI as we basically stand in solidarity.
Absolutely, stand in solidarity. Kyla, I could not agree with Dr. Mike more. I think it's a high point. A lot of times in conversation and within our newscast, persons would say from across the region, why are you talking about this? This is none of your business. You should stay out of the U.S. Business. But at the end of the day, like Dr. Mike said, we have a responsibility at the end of the day. And when you see stuff like this trickling down within our local community, we have no choice but to make a stand. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we have had lots more of news for you, but that will come at a later time. We're here every day, so we're not going anywhere, live at 6 p.m. from the beautiful British Virgin Islands.
Most definitely. And Ron, as you said, that's it for today's News Roundup. Be sure to follow us for daily news updates at 284media.com. You can like us on Facebook at 284media or 284BVI on Instagram as well as Twitter. I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes.
And I'm Ron Grant. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.